All right, and we are live. Welcome to the Green Nurse Podcast, everyone, where we bring you hope and inspiration for growth and healing. We're here to change the dialogue and stigma around what it means to feel good and be high, hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. And oftentimes here on our show, we talk about things that people don't want to talk about. However, they're really, really important subjects for us to discuss because it decreases stigma for healing. 2021 is the year of the nurse again, and the year of the midwife. And what we've been doing here on the Green Nurse Podcast is we've been highlighting and illuminating health professionals and cannabis nurses in the space because we're truly in revolutionary times, changing how we approach and take care of patients and manage our health. So literally, we don't all wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be a cannabis nurse, or hey, I'm going to enter into the space. There's generally a compelling story that goes along with the plunge. And so basically, we're going to discuss with our guests what makes someone enter into the cannabis space as a nurse. What makes a military nurse wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to become a cannabis nurse. So I'm really, really excited to introduce Captain Jason Straw, United States Air Force retired, who was a critical care nurse, a critical care air transport CCAT nurse, and an Afghanistan war veteran. Jason Straw is a retired Air Force captain and war veteran who was a critical care nurse, a critical care air transport nurse, and a cardiopulmonary nurse consultant for the United States Air Force. After retiring in 2015, one of Jason's patients was treated with medical cannabis. And after seeing the amazing results and realizing the medical benefits, Jason's life was changed forever, and he's been advocating ever since. Now, Jason is a medical cannabis refugee. Jason and his wife, Shelly, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, they've dedicated their lives to cannabis research and education. Recognized last year for his military service and cannabis advocacy with Scrubs magazine, he was voted the top cannabis activist at the 2020 Indiana Cannabis Awards. Jason helped to organize the first ever congressional cannabis debate in Indiana while advocating for veterans and working with the Hoosier Veterans for Medical Cannabis group. Jason's hard work, dedication, and experience got him voted as vice chair of Indiana NORML. Last year in 2020, Jason presented the first ever cannabis policy in Indiana to the Indiana State Nurses Association for consideration. Jason is now growing his own cannabis, working with his wife, Shelly, who is also a cannabis nurse. So we're really excited for Jason to share his compelling story with us from serving his country to serving cannabis patients. Mark Twain once said, the two most important days in your life are the day that you're born and then the day that you discover why. So this is really, really exciting. I'm really excited to have you here today. Thank you so much, Jason, for your service, and welcome to the show.
Well, you're welcome, Sherri. And my story for the medical field goes back to 4th grade.
Wow.
Yeah, my grandfather got sick and he needed a cardiologist. So I wanted to be a cardiologist. So that's where my story with medicine goes. The other thing is teaching about drugs and health has been my whole life. My great uncle was the captain of the detectives in my hometown. His daughter was a dare officer. So she taught not to use drugs and the negative effects, which they included marijuana into that, probably because they weren't taught any different, just like I wasn't.
Right.
As I move forward, in the 90s, my mom got sick with cancer, and my dad let me know that the investigative new drug program that runs the marijuana grow for the federal government in, I believe it's Mississippi, she was offered to smoke medical cannabis from that 1976 decision settlement with the Department of Justice with patients. So learning that in the last year has opened my eyes a little bit. When I was in the military, we gave Marinol, which is an FDA-approved medication since 1985 to treat nausea, wasting syndrome, especially in cancer and AIDS patients. So in the military, we were giving Marinol, which is a Schedule III drug. And then they legalized hemp CBD, which is a Schedule V called Epidiolex. And that's where I had a patient. I was raised to be a prohibitionist, learned all the reasons why, and then you start separating the facts.
Yeah.
Once you see how this miracle plant can interact with almost every chronic condition known to man, they don't know the details. One of the big things I hear from politicians is, well, they don't have a standard dosage. And
never going to be one, and it's going to change over time. I hate to tell you.
Well, and this is something that I explained to the senator, who is also a diploma nurse, that when I worked in the ICU, the doctors would start here with this drip and then titrate to these effects.
Yes.
There's no dose.
I spent 10 years in the intensive care unit, cross-trained in them. So I totally remember they would give us parameters with different drip rates to keep people alive, vasopressors, vasodilators, all of these different substances. They would say titrate to, blood pressure, titrate to heart rate, titrate to urinary output, titrate to, you know what I mean? All of these different things, cardiopulmonary assessment, really, really important stuff. So it does make sense, that we would do this the exact same way, because as we both know, cannabinoid therapeutics, everything that we do or don't do in our lives affects how cannabis works in our bodies. So it makes sense that titration is what we need to do when we dose. If you think about too, the endocannabinoid system being an on-off switch, we're producing internal endogenous cannabinoids all day long, depending upon what's going on in our body. So it makes sense, like the microdosing, the dosing adjustments, the cannabinoid adjustments. And, there is science there, but it's constantly evolving. And so until we get to that point in time, it's really about start low, go slow, experimenting with the different cannabinoids and learning how different activities and everything that you do in your life is affecting how you use this plant. So what I find really fascinating is that you have a nursing career in the Air Force. So as a nurse in the Air Force, did you have to work through stigma as a nurse?
Well, I retired before I discovered medical marijuana. Okay. I knew just barely knew anything at all about Marinol. So it was FDA drug. I started reading about it. I'm like, wow, this is strange. I didn't realize that THC was federally legal to give as long as it was synthetic. And I experienced that usually when you make a synthetic drug, it's far more harmful to the person than the drug in its natural form.
Makes sense.
Just take cocaine, for instance. When it's in the leaf form, it has good medicinal properties for a lot of conditions. But you refine it and you get all these, you get cocaine, white powder. A lot of people get in trouble with that. So when I retired, I felt uncomfortable going in front of the Indiana legislative body to speak as a former or retired military nursing officer. And I've talked in front of generals. I escorted the Deputy Surgeon General of Australia around and showed them.
Sorry.
It's okay. You're gonna have a few laughs, right?
I'm telling you, I thought that was come right through my door. It was like that close. Did you guys all hear that? We probably heard the scream.
Like jump.
At least I didn't lose power. Usually my computer starts to blink right around this time. Woo, that was sorry. Let me just reset. Big loud noises. Boom. Jeez. I can't even imagine.
You gotta face your fears.
Face fears, exactly.
And so, presenting to all these the military provided me a lot of skills that I wouldn't have had otherwise in presentation and teaching people who had more knowledge academically than me, but not necessarily more experience. So I took the experience from the military once I learned about cannabis, and I started seeing how it was helping kids who had no hope. And the kid that touched my life, he was supposed to die in 6 to 12 months. He's still living. And they finally got him on Epidiolex instead of just, an over-the-counter hemp CBD oil that they were bringing into the state at that time illegally. They ended up passing the law in Indiana in 2017, then readjusting the law in 2018 for hemp CBD, which was a big breakthrough. And a lot of cannabis patients, they'll end up needing both medications. One or the other might help, but usually what ends up happening is it doesn't quite do what you want to do. And Shelly and I started doing a little research into that, and we found out that diet is extremely important. So there's, if you remember back in the 80s, the PKU kids who were dying because they were eating a certain protein that's in certain foods. Well, that protein, we found out, actually interferes with your endocannabinoid system and can block it from getting the cannabinoids to the receptors, so you don't get as much of a benefit. So it may take you changing your diet or increasing your dose.
Yep.
And these are things that all need to be researched further. So as we kind of muddle through this, because we have a hodgepodge of systems throughout the entire country, this state does it this way, that state does it that way.
I know. It's so frustrating.
It's just now starting to look at allowing other people besides the federal growth program, which has all sorts of problems. They found mold in it. They found pesticides, fertilizer. Some of the medical joints didn't even have a flower in it. It was just sticks and leaves and seeds.
Right.
So that's completely useless.
Yeah.
Actually sued the federal government for the poor quality of medical marijuana that they gave her to treat or do research and treat veterans with PTSD. Yeah. And this is where we're at. The federal government is decades behind what these states are doing. And Michigan or California or Oregon or Colorado has far superior medical cannabis than the federal government has had since the 50s and 60s, when they started growing this stuff and looking at it.
Right.
So it really makes you wonder. And then, I love that Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court justice, came out and said that the marijuana laws just seem irrelevant because the federal government's allowing 30-some states to do whatever they want, which is enough to pass a constitutional amendment. But the federal government still says it's illegal unless you're in these states. So what we're doing is creating classes of people in the United States, the haves and the have-nots, which under the Constitution you're not supposed to do. So it really gets interesting. How can our government still, with this huge review of over 24,000 studies that conclusively says, yes, marijuana or cannabis is a medicine. It treats certain things. And this was 2017, and they still haven't legalized anything. You have testimony after testimony after testimony of patients and veterans that, like for instance, I was on about 13 different FDA-approved medications. 3 of them were inhalers. And I was able to get off all of them. And I was on the verge of stage 3 kidney disease, and I've almost completely reversed it. I'm just barely in stage 1, according to the VA labs that they gave me. And it was a 13-year decline. And I bought a Rain Soft water purifier. I had a reverse osmosis system. So, and my kidneys kept getting worse. The problem was the FDA medications harm your liver and your kidneys.
So what medications were you on, Jason? Just curious. What medications were you on?
Well, I was on the 3 inhalers. You had albuterol,
The ones that were affecting your kidneys? Were there medications that were affecting your kidneys?
Well, the steroids that I breathe in, they're going to affect kidneys too. Even
Okay.
though they still affect kidneys. I was on gabapentin, carotene, and then there was another. Those are psych drugs, but they were giving them to me for migraines, and I used to have up to 20 migraines a month, and sometimes they were blinding. So I had to have somebody else drive for me if I started getting a migraine. I found the only thing that would stop them in their track is medical marijuana. I could take medications. I might have to lay there for 6 or 12 hours for my brain chemistry to get back to where I could tolerate it. But let's see here.
Well, here's the thing too, Jason, the migraines, we know now as nurses that migraines, fibromyalgia, and irritable bowel syndrome are all classic endocannabinoid deficiency. They all have hyperalgesic states. They are really hard to diagnose. It's a lot of subjective. It's the diagnosis of exclusion, trying to figure it out. And, literally one of the radiographic images, I just did a show on migraines last week. And it showed that people with migraine headaches have an overabundance of CB1 receptors in their brain actually being created looking for the anandamide molecule. Our bodies are so smart, and it's saying, help me, help me, help me, right? Looking for it, looking for the anandamide molecule. And if we're not making enough of our own, what happens? The messages don't get where they need to go, and our body starts to become out of homeostasis or balance. Right.
And you mentioned irritable bowel syndrome, which I had or have. The doctors told me, they said, well, we can do a surgery and it'll help with this one or that symptom. And I said, well, I really don't want to do surgery. I'd rather do an alternative. And the only medication that they could give me that did anything was Bentyl. It helped control the spasm and terrible pain. And I'd have up to 13 stools a day. But over 10 years, I changed my diet. I did research. I got it all under control. I couldn't drink any coffee or soda or have a candy bar because of the caffeine and chocolate. And then I deployed the first time, and I had another friend, a mentor, a nursing mentor. He's a fellow charge nurse, and he said, you look really tired. I said, well, being in a war zone, spending 80 hours a week on the unit, and then having to do all the other work we're supposed to do, I said, I don't know how I'm going to make it. He goes, well, just have some coffee. I said, well, I can't because of my irritable bowel. Well, he convinced me finally. I was just too tired. I started taking caffeine and coffee to keep me awake and running to take care of our patients. So when even if there's something that's in your way and you have to do it, like I knew I shouldn't have the caffeine, but I've been drinking caffeine now for another decade. But I think some of the stuff was I was trying to get the omega-3s, which your body used to make the anandamide and 2-AG. So those omega-3s are very important. I found out there's a huge link between your diet and your endocannabinoid system. Now,
Jason, this is like, I was blown away when I learned this. Our enteric nervous system, which is from our mouth to our butt, communicates to our central nervous system via the endocannabinoid system. That to me was a shoe drop. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
We have an entire endocannabinoid system in our gut. That's the bottom line. We do.
Yeah, look at your gut. The bacteria interact with what you eat, and they send signals out through the nervous system to just what you're talking about. So if you're not eating the right things, then you're going to have problems. So if we used to have hemp everywhere, it's like now I'm feeding my chickens hemp seeds, hemp hearts, and they love them. And the eggs are great. And I know that those cannabinoids are being used to make the egg richer and better. Because when I crack open the egg, it is so bright orange. You never see an egg that bright. You crack open the ones from the store, and they're just kind of a pale yellow. I started reading about the eggs, and the brighter orange the egg is, the more nutrients and the less harmful fats are in it. So we've malnourished our animals even to the point that their endocannabinoid system, they can't produce healthy meat and products for us to consume. So we think we're getting the nutrition we need,
But we're not. Oh
but
God, hands down.
we're eliminated out of the diet for the last 70, 80 years.
Yeah. You think about it, Jason, like at the turn of the century when they made cannabis illegal, that, alcohol prohibition was over, cannabis or hemp became illegal. We had the fast food industry. They were creating ways to prolong shelf life of our food. Think about that, right? Hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenation was a process that was started in the 1700s to harden soap. They figured out a way to prolong the shelf life of food with hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenated oils, when in temperature above 98 degrees, so just think about where 98 point whatever, turns to plastic. So you just imagine having microflecks of plastic circulating through your system. It's just not good. Fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial colorings, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, high fructose corn syrup, and sugar all downregulate the endocannabinoid system. That to me is it's just huge. So I actually look at cannabis, and I say this a lot to educate, it's a phytobotanical nutrient.
Mm-hmm.
It is food. It is something that can completely 100% sustain us in a way that's so healthy, using.
You're right. You're right. The nutrition part of cannabis is amazing all by itself without even taking and changing the flower to THC delta 9. And so that hardened, we know it is like arteriosclerosis or heart disease.
Yes.
That's from the foods that we eat, these processes, and from the lack of appropriate nutrition. Like Shelly and I, we keep trying to go back to taking the hemp seed oil, which has linoleic acid in it, which helps protect your heart and helps prevent that plaque from collecting on your arteries. So it's good for your heart in that sense. Now I've done some research. I did some presentations, as you mentioned, and I went over Dr. O's presentation, who was a pharmacist, and now he's a cardiologist in Canada, and he now teaches about cannabinoids and marijuana and the medical uses. And he mentioned that when you take THC, it puts the same amount of stress on your heart as when you go out and exercise. So when you start putting the pieces together, like Professor Clark at IU South Bend, he found research saying cannabis users have a lower body mass.
Oh, yeah.
So that's good for your heart. Your heart has to work harder when you take THC. So that means that you have to be in good shape. The other thing we discovered is that almost every cardiac med is affected. They interact with the cannabinoids. Mm-hmm. So it increases the effect of your cardiac medication. So if you have an antiarrhythmic cardiac medication, it's not going to work the same. If you have a blood pressure medicine, either raising it or lowering it, those are going to be interfered with too. So what happened with me, I found out that, like gabapentin, I had to start decreasing it because I would become too lethargic and I'd have a delay in my speech.
Yes, I was on 3,600 milligrams of gabapentin at one point.
Yeah, I was taking
a lot. 3,600 milligrams. That's a ton. That's like.
They started me at 900, and I couldn't talk. I literally could not talk. It screwed up. Like I was trying to get my words out, and I couldn't. And I had to cut it back on my own. And as a critical care nurse, we do that all the time. I had a neurologist tell me, he said, I'll just write it for the max dose for your prescription, and then you titrate, because we don't have dosing that works for you. Right. And they tried every medication, every treatment, except for Botox, which I said, no, I'm not taking a neurotoxin.
And this was for your migraines, right?
My migraines, yeah. Right. Yeah, they said I couldn't take blood pressure medicine because I was too healthy. They did I went into a study, and they put a Holter monitor on me, and they said my heart rate gets down into the 20s at night.
Wow.
I was on a flight with my anesthesiologist, and we were putting the pulse ox on, and their heart rates were like Gabe's was in the 80s or 90s, my doctor's like, oh, I got a heart rate of 60. I'm in great shape. And I put mine on, and he was looking at it while I was working, and he's like, are you okay? And I was up working. He's sitting there. And I said, yeah, I feel fine. Why? He said, your heart rate is 39.
What's your cardiac output?
That's right. You got
right?
to blood pressure and do your math.
Heart rate, blood pressure, cardiac output.
Yeah, so these are things that you'll learn.
Yeah.
And he didn't ask me because I looked bad. He had me ask me because he saw the number. And
Right.
there are great physicians I've worked with who've talked about, looking at equipment and looking at the patient.
Yes.
And if you don't look at the patient, you'll never get the full picture, because there was a patient whose pulse ox was off and it was sitting next to their finger reading 100%. And they were intubated. And so the whole thing is, he brought a whole team in and asked them, and nobody could figure out that the patient was the most important thing. Not the chart, not the nurse, not the monitor, but the patient.
What's the patient doing?
This patient's going to get extubated today. And they all said, oh, how can we extubate them? I said, they're doing better than when they came in.
Right.
But what
you find, though, Jason, honestly, as a critical care nurse, I remember working 12-hour shifts at night, and literally in the morning, the doctors would come up and they'd be like, what orders do you need me to sign?
I wish mine were that.
No, they did. They were like, literally, they would come up and, it was just so busy. You think you got cardiac ICU, trauma ICU, medical ICU, neuro ICU, just a lot of different intensive care units, and really hard, so the nurses are so important. Like, we're the eyes and the ears. We're there at the bedside, really looking at everything, not just the monitor. You're right. Really examining the patient to make decisions. So I want to get into that really quickly. So nursing career in the Air Force, medical trauma, intensive care unit nurse. I can imagine that you've seen things that are worse than horror movies. So how did that affect you?
Well, after my first deployment, I started developing signs of PTSD and major depression, and it got worse after my second deployment. And they tell you after 3 deployments, you got PTSD. Now they argue, is it major depression? Is it PTSD? Is it a combination of both? They don't know.
It's
they
still
don't have a definitive test. Yeah, I mean,
challenging.
There are patients that nobody else would touch because they had to have somebody. And I would ask my nurses, I said, who's comfortable with what patients? And I took whatever was left over. And I had 20-some certifications, ranging from pediatrics to my CCRN, to the CCAT certification. I mean, I used to be an ACLS instructor too.
Me too. I love that. ACLS, PALS, Pediatric Advanced Life Cardiac Support. And I'll tell you, I'm such a junkie when it comes to experiences, is that I cross-trained. It's just a fun hug and nug for y'all out there in my traditional nursing days. Is I loved intensive care unit nursing because I had to be fully grounded, present, and mindful in that moment. There was nothing else that was as important as that patient that I was taking care of. There was nothing else for me to see, think, or do. And so I cross-trained in all of the different intensive care units. So what would happen is I would come in at night to work and I wouldn't know where I was going. That was, talk about joys in the journey. Where am I going to go tonight? Had no idea. And it was so fulfilling to be able to work with so many different patient populations, so many different nurses, so many different physicians, and to really, truly understand, like, that's where I got the most in-depth anatomy and physiology. You're looking at, restoring the body, after it's been traumatized for whatever reason, sickness, illness, injury, car accident, shooting, whatever it may be, you're really there looking at everything. And so it was a really powerful but humbling experience. And I'm interesting enough that you say this, is that I've been working, there's a nurse out there, his name is Matt Cassio. Big shout out to you, Matt. He's a registered nurse and he developed a program on compassion fatigue. And the interesting thing, and that incorporates PTSD. So I started to learn about compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is a combination of burnout and also the systems being a failure, meaning that you know what you want to do, you know how you want to take care of patients, you have the capability of doing it, but the system is not allowing you to do what you want to do to care for that patient. And then the other part of it is witnessing things or experiencing things as a nurse that are really, really traumatic. So you put that together and it's a recipe for compassion fatigue, and that includes anxiety, PTSD, insomnia, panic disorder, all of these different things that people experience when they've witnessed. When you see things like this over and over and over again, what I did as a nurse was I tucked it away. I compartmentalized it. I stored it in a shelf so I didn't have to deal with it. But later on, it was very, very interesting. Later on, when I became a patient and was on the other side of the bed and literally was sick and suffering for a couple of years, that's when all of that stuff rose to the surface. And I started to have to experience that. And that's when my PTSD kicked in, literally. And it was really interesting. My experience, pharmaceutical and medical trauma, the traditional system failed me. And that's okay. It's because they didn't know what they didn't know, and they didn't know that they didn't know it. So I forgive them, because literally I didn't know about cannabis as medicine until 2014. I only understood cannabis to be something that you played with and that you got high with and that you had a good time with and that you recreated with. So really, really eye-opening for sure.
Well, I found Shelly helped guide me down this path. And as a fellow critical care nurse, she understands better how to walk somebody through. Like you said, your PTSD and depression got bad because of all the experiences. Well, the nice thing is when you have another nurse to walk with you and then say, well, here's the marijuana strain that maybe you should try tonight. Or here's a gummy made with this marijuana strain. We'll get you sleep. Now, I'll tell you, the first time I took one of Shelly's edibles, I got up in the middle of the night, went to the bathroom. I went to wash my hands, and I turned to go out of the bathroom. I remember falling. Next thing I remember, I was laying on the floor with a bruise on my hip, and I was sore and I couldn't stand up. So I crawled into the bedroom.
Oh, no.
And Shelly's like, what's going on? What's going on?
Over-medicated.
Over-medicated. Well, and at night, you got to realize my heart rate's really low.
Oh, that's right.
You've got to figure out if you're on any medications or you have a really low heart rate and you take cannabis and you're a novice like I was, you really have somebody there to watch out for you and to remember these things. Like I said, if you're on a cardiac med, you have to have somebody helping you and guiding you through. And it's not the only time that there was another time I was knocked out for 16 hours.
16 hours?
16 hours, yeah.
Is Shelly back there? Shelly, what are you doing? You're back there giggling.
Do you know what, though? Now he can do the gummy. We've learned to make adjustments with our family and friends. We make the gummy the same dosage. Whoops, where am I at? The same dosage every time. So they know how to use it now. But that really did happen. But I want you to know, when we were at the lake house and everybody asked me where Jason was, and I said I knocked him out for 16 hours. I said, guys, you have a little too much THC. He's out. They banged my door down, wanting that. And I said,
I wanted.
Guys, this wasn't my intent. They're like, we need sleep,
We need sleep.
I'm serious. Like, we need sleep. We're desperate. What do we do? So we started learning to microdose with some friends and not take gummies.
Yes. So basically your stance, you became a medical cannabis patient for asthma, migraines, PTSD, correct?
Yes, well, and there's a whole list of conditions that I was having problems with. I even had lost my sense of smell.
Oh, you did?
Verified through the VA. They take the coffee, they take citrusy smell, and then they take ammonia. So, it's like, oh, can you smell this? I'm like, no, I can't smell it at all. It was the citrusy thing, and then they did the coffee, and then they smiled. They're like, we got you now. They break open ammonia and stick it right underneath my nose. They're like, what's that? And I'm like, can't smell it. But I started taking the hemp CBD, and slowly I started to be able to smell things. Because I used to be a baker. They could bring me a dish, and I could taste it and smell it and recreate it back when I worked in the making pastries in my teens. But I'd lost that ability for decades. And we've been here in the last few years, I started to get my smell back. I think that those nerves were damaged and needed to heal, and the cannabis probably helped those nerves heal, which normally would not.
Right.
Normally when you lose your sense of smell, unless it's transient, like some people get COVID, and like Shelly and I got COVID, we couldn't smell or taste anything. It was really weird.
Did it come back?
Yes.
Oh, that's good. A lot of people's hasn't come back. There's some people who's
Yeah,
a friend of mine has not come back yet. He got COVID in January. Still.
Hemp CBD along with his marijuana, and
There you go.
You got to look at what your body needs to heal.
Yeah.
So if you need vitamin D, so you can get the magnesium, which all are building blocks for nerves, and they're there to help the liver. You need magnesium. Most of us are deficient in these things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So listen, yep. Jason, what I want people to know, because there's a lot of people that are new out there, nursing career in the Air Force, PTSD. A lot of people want to know, and they want to hear, what does PTSD look like? What does it look like in your life? We know that it's mild, there's moderate, severe. And so what does that look like in your life, and how is cannabis helpful? It's just a good question.
Well, PTSD has lots of faces. I work with a lot of veterans who've had PTSD. Some of them are very aggressive and quick to pull out a firearm. Others are in such great despair. And I've been through a lot of similar things. Like I've had anger, and I've had Great Depression. And, because I had a career in the military, and they teach you to tuck away, it's like you said with nursing too, you tuck it away into a compartment and you deal with it later, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe.
You're going to deal with it because it's going to pop back up as a condition because of the anxiety, the stress that those experiences bring to light. So with me, what happened was I became suicidal. I could not deal with the stress of people dying around me anymore. You go to war, you get mortars around, blowing up buildings around you, people dying around you, and you.
So not only that, Jason. So not only are you in a war zone with people dying around you, but then people are coming to you for you to try to save.
Yeah. I mean, my first deployment, there were over 600 patients that I worked on, is what they told me, and that was about probably 75% of the way through my deployment when they wrote my package, because it's all paperwork to them, and so they have to write it before they leave. And I got there at a halfway point for my commander, and so working through, like I've been to counselors for, forever, it seems.
Me too.
And they get frustrated. They're like, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. I'm like, well, I understand about the breathing techniques, I understand about the stepping back and taking a break, and there's tools that they've given me, but you keep running across situations that trigger your depression, trigger your PTSD, and so it's not like one tool fixes everything. Now with cannabis, when Shelly sees that I'm stressed, she just lights up a joint, says, "Here, I think you need to smoke this," because she can tell, when I'm agitated.
Oh yeah.
And
so the inhalation is a really, really powerful method for that. I mean, it's immediate, it's instantaneous, it works on those receptors, it takes the edge down. My story, really quickly, I'm just going to share it for our viewers, is I was suicidal. Seriously, suicidal the last 6 months before I discovered medical cannabis, every day. And it wasn't that I wanted to die. I wanted the pain to go away. That was the bottom line. And so here's the thing is, so in that instantaneous, me taking 2 puffs of cannabis, the pain went away and the suicide was gone within 5 minutes. That's huge. That's huge. Just to think I was 6 months, I could have been out of my suicidality. Seriously.
And there are, and people who work in the U.S., and not necessarily even work, but people who are disabled, people who are public servants, the military, high suicide rates. And it's just a simple treatment that they can try. It's just a couple puffs, like you said, off of a joint, and using CBD and other cannabis products, and then looking at their diet. Like I know, so I believe in holistic.
Yes, total health care.
Yeah, and patient-centered. So you got to listen to the patient. Yep. And I don't like treating just symptoms. A lot of the doctors just want to, okay, I'm just going to treat the symptom. Like, well, what's causing that? What
exactly?
So if you don't find out what's causing it, which we now know most, if not all, chronic illnesses are caused from an endocannabinoid deficiency in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
So the other thing is cannabis cannot work properly if you're not getting the proper nutrition. So you can feed your endocannabinoid system, but if you're not getting the B vitamins, you're not getting the vitamin D, you're not getting your minerals, the cannabis is not going to be as effective. I keep hearing people, oh, I've tried this CBD.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. This doesn't work. That doesn't work. I go, it works, but you have to do other things. So cannabinoid therapeutics is much more than cannabis. So you have a huge giant pie. Cannabis is a piece of the pie. It's not the whole pie. It's a piece of it. Every single thing that we do, diet, nutrition, exercise, laughter, social connection, spirituality, all of these things contribute to how it works in our body. And I'm sure you can give the story too. One day you'll be taking care of yourself in a really good way, eating healthy, exercising, doing all the good things, and cannabis works good for you. A couple days later, you forget to do some of those things. You don't work out. You're drinking the soda. You're eating the chips. Like, gee, I still don't feel so good. And so it's not to go grab for more cannabis. It's to look at your behaviors that have contributed to why the cannabis might not be working the way you want it to work.
And that's the problem with a lot of patients today, is they don't realize how hard it is to stay in that zone, that healthy zone where you feel good, you're doing all the things you're supposed to do, but then you have life.
You have life
demands, you have family demands. It's just a matter of figuring out how to work things into your schedule that's going to be the most beneficial to you as a patient. And Shelly and I have, Shelly, I guess, expanded her look on this because she didn't have as much experience in that. Just like I didn't have the experience with the endocannabinoid system like Shelly had. We've learned from each other, and it sounds like you and Mark, you bring great presentations on whole body healing, the whole person. I love it.
Well, this is the part too that's so interesting, and it's only through my experience of being a patient on the other side of the bed. Literally, I think that experience really opened up my eyes, because I was a chronically ill woman, like couldn't even take care of my children. So, the whole point about all of that is that this plant comes in, and Mark and I, his experience, my experience, we bring the experience together. And when we think about how physicians work with us as patients, how we actually work with patients is we always focus on symptoms, body parts, disease processes, labels. If we're lucky, we may get to emotional health, and rarely do we ever get to spiritual health. So cannabis, one of the presentations that we did last year for the American Cannabis Nurses Association, was spirituality is the root of cannabis care. Because think about it, for me in general, and for a lot of the other patients that we've worked with, is the first thing that cannabis brings people is hope. And that hope, wow, be different. I don't have to stop, I don't have to live this way anymore. Wow, this really works. Hearing patient stories, people sharing compelling stories, having an experience where it may have shifted your perception. And then with that hope, what happens is you become inspired. And when you're inspired, you're in spirit. And when you're in spirit, anything's possible. And so from that inspiration, right? You grow. You have the ability, you get inspired, spirits giving you messages. I know cannabis is talking to me all the time, to do things differently, to think outside the box. Cannabis has removed the box that says I must think outside the box. That's the part that was so cool. And then healing, inevitably, hope, inspiration, growth. You do things differently. You learn about this plant. You go down the rabbit hole. Once you go down the cannabis rabbit hole, there's no going back. You can't unlearn this. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And then the healing happens. And the most important thing that we share when we're working with patients is healing is not the absence of illness or disease. It's doing the best you can with what you have right here, right now. So when I go to the doctor, I got the list of so many diagnoses, but you know what? I'm not going to live in that story. That's a part of who I was. I'm still labeled like that, but I'm not going to identify with that. I have all the different tools in the toolbox to truly help, like I said, nourish my endocannabinoid system and to help me get back. So living isn't the absence, health and healing isn't the absence of illness or disease. It's doing the best you can. It's about living your best life with what you have. Go ahead.
So there's two things that you made me think about while you're talking. First is the holy oil made with cannabis. It talks about how when people were sick, they go to the priest and they get anointed. And I've gotten into arguments with preachers, and the one that I really thought was fun in a way and educational was the guy said, "This is the devil's lettuce. It is against God, so we should keep it illegal." And this was in a Senate hearing. So when I was talking to him online, I told him, I said, "You realize that the holy oil was made with cannabis, and Jesus anointed people with holy oil, healing them." And he said, "Well, Jesus didn't do that." I said, he goes, "Jesus didn't need to do that." I said, "Jesus might not have needed to do that, but he was smart enough to use what he had." And I mean, what's he going to say? Jesus is dumb? So here's a preacher who doesn't even understand the history of cannabis with Judeo-Christian religion. Then the other thing, you're talking about the doctors. Now, Shelly and I had a really interesting experience at our local hospital, and it's a hospital system, so there's lots of branches all over. So we both got food poisoning. And we both went in.
Oh yeah, I think you told me this story. This is a good one.
Yeah, Shelly had a horrible case. We couldn't get her vomiting under control. And I took her in, dropped her off. They won't let me go in with her. And they just give her a hard time. And she said, "The only med I take is medical cannabis." And they're like, "Oh, you got
use disorder." Oh, they diagnosed her with cannabis hyperemesis?
Yeah, just because she was throwing up, couldn't stop. But we ate at the same place. We got sick at the same time. Yeah. I got diarrhea. She got vomiting and diarrhea. So they were like endocannabinoid. It's like Shelly told me. She said, "We have an endocannabinoid system. I feed my endocannabinoid system. I treat myself." And they're like, what?
They didn't know that. That's just a shame. That's embarrassing.
It is, especially in a state that's adult use state. I mean, and the state said that 90% of the population use some form of cannabis at least once a month. 90%. But these healthcare professionals knew nothing about the endocannabinoid system, nothing about FDA-approved medications. So we wrote them a letter and gave them the links from the FDA on the cannabis medication that's legal in the United States.
They didn't even know about Marinol?
No.
They didn't know. Wow.
And they told Shelly that they couldn't learn this stuff because it wasn't FDA approved. I'm like, so when I went to the Indiana State Nurses Association, there was about 100, 150 nurses, doctors, and not just any nurses, the top nurses in the state. They had their doctorates or their masters. I asked, how many people in here know that they have an endocannabinoid system? One person out of all those healthcare professionals. And there were doctors there too. Then I asked, who knows about Marinol? 2 really old nurses, like they have the experience and they've worked with it, but they said a long time ago. So everything was new to everybody. In this presentation I was giving, they were blown away. I couldn't leave. They literally, people kept coming at me for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Right. So when you're dealing with the medical community, we think as public that they know about all of it, or at least their specialty. And to tell you the truth, there is so much to learn about the body. And people, healthcare professionals, their hands are tied by the federal government to learn things, to learn skills. These people can learn stuff, these people can't. Oh, if you're in the military, forget the rules. Whatever you got to do to save the patient, you can learn and you can use it as long as somebody trained you. Like I was pushing vasopressors in deployment. Why? Because my anesthesiologist was busy with another patient. He told me, press some vasopressors and just do it until you get their pressure up and then titrate the drip, because the patient was crashing. So I did that while he's working on the other patient. Both patients lived. Right. These are things that, we
can adapt this into the traditional system. They just need to be open to it. This can truly 100% be integrated. I mean, I look at it as, you think about Coumadin. Think about Coumadin, blood thinner. What do we have in hospitals? We have Coumadin clinics, right? So patients come in, they're on blood thinners, and you have to have a specific, it's a PT-INR. They're measuring, how thin your blood is, and they want it within a particular range. And so you have Coumadin nurses because specific things that you eat, other pharmaceuticals that you take may interact with that. And you want those levels to be just right. Because if your levels are too low, you can clot, you can have a stroke. If your level's too high and you cut yourself, you can bleed to death. So we have actually Coumadin clinic nurses that would manage these patients. I see the exact same thing. Patients come in and you call the green nurses, right? And you come in and you assess the patient. You assess the patient. Why are they taking cannabis? They're in the hospital. What could they convert to? Like, how can we, with what's going on? I mean, it's so doable. All it requires is for people to be open to it, open to change, open to incorporating something new and different into a system that's going to complement. We're not saying, as nurses, and I are both saying, it's not all or nothing. We know, because we've been on both sides of the bed. We've been there. But
the government tells you it's all or nothing, because if you have cannabis and you're using it to titrate down your opioids, and you go to a rehab, they say you either get the cannabis or you get your rehab meds. And we've had patients that said, "We'll get our cannabis. Forget the methadone or Suboxone, because cannabis works to treat what's really the problem." It's not, you're not titrating them down with another opioid. And they've shown that they can do that, and it takes 9 to 12 months. Cannabis is a lot quicker. It protects your whole brain. So that addiction brain is pain, and they think they're going to be able to rush people through and have them suffer extreme pain and not want to go back to the heroin or the fentanyl or whatever they were taking on the street. It just blows my mind that they push people instead of work with people, and they push them the wrong direction. And we have friends who lost their kids because of this very problem in our healthcare system. And I've been trying to work with prosecutors and law enforcement. I even ran for sheriff, talking about some of the changes that need to happen. And the sheriff that won started implementing some of the stuff I suggested.
Oh, that's awesome.
From the race, but they claim it as their own, but they're not medical people, and they're pushing the medical ideas that I ran on. So even though you don't win an office or you talk to somebody, you do influence them. People watching this show are going to be influenced on looking this stuff up, or what do I have, or what?
I hope so.
To talk.
Yeah, that's what we want to do. Is we're here to decrease suffering and improve quality of life. That's the bottom line. What I want to talk about now before we wrap up is your awesome wife, Shelly. Shelly was on a couple weeks ago. You guys are going to have to go back to a couple shows or check out YouTube. I'll actually put the YouTube link in the comments of this podcast so people can go back and watch. But how did you and Shelly meet? She's also a cannabis nurse. And what are you guys doing together in the cannabis space?
So my ex-wife had asked for divorce and pushed me out of the house, which I became homeless. So I was homeless last year, or transient, combination of the two. So I was vice chair of Indiana Normal, and they'd been pushing me for like 6 or 9 months to go talk to Shelly. They're like, we see she's doing great things where she is. Just go and connect. So after, we had a few events, and I ended up going and meeting Shelly at her office in Gas City, right next to the City Hall and the police station. So the first time I met with her, she had me do a video. I was like,
She had you do a video?
Yeah.
I love it.
We posted it. I went back, and my friend Jeff was like, you. I'm like, what? She goes, she likes you. I'm like, no, we're just doing a video. And he's like, look, she touched your arm here. That means she likes you. Look at her face. So, I'm like, okay, Jeff, whatever. So we started having regional meetings. Jeff wanted to get together with all the locals because he's in charge. He's the founder of Who's Your Vets for Medical Cannabis. So we started seeing how we can work together. I'm the bridge now between iNormal and Who's Your Vets for Medical Cannabis. And Shelly started coming with April Weaver to the meetings and to see how we're going to move forward. And over time, Shelly and I just started working together on cannabis stuff in that area. And she was kind enough to let me stay with her. And then she got a lake house, and I would stay there, and we would work. And we've helped a whole lot of people between the two of us with our knowledge. And it's just grown since then. And then we ended up getting married. I kept asking her.
Oh, you did?
Ready to get married? Ready to get married? And she's
my God, I love it.
Spoke up one day and I said, I'll marry you today.
Oh my God, that is so sweet. A cannabis love story. It's so beautiful. Hey, listen, while I got you on there, Shelly, I got to tell you something funny. Off topic. But I did a TikTok video. You're going to laugh. And I have a new bong. And I was doing a little video educating on the bong. There was no plant material. There was nothing in there at all. They took it down like 4 times. So there was someone in one of the comments. And then I put up a picture of all my blocked things and put music to it or whatever. Someone commented saying that they know you. Do you know Shelly Straw? You have to be in touch with her. So it was really there. You're known. Someone in TikTok knows you.
Really? That's really cool. We've done a lot of videos throughout time. And before I met Jason, I did a lot of videos with my own personal assistant because I started in 2017. So once April Weaver came and asked me to speak, I just haven't shut up since.
There you go. It's great. So what are you guys doing? So what's going on with Jason and Shelly and Healing Green? What's happening? What's going on?
Shelly still has a CBD company in Indiana, and we help people with that. That's the first step that we usually work with people. Then here in Michigan, we left Indiana because of their oppressive policies. Indiana has the highest per populace arrest rate for cannabis in the world.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We had some people do some research on that, and they went from, over the last few years, when Holcomb first took office, there was about 5,000 arrests per year. Next year was 10, then 15. Now it's over 20,000 a year. And it's been there steady for a couple years now. And so we encourage people to go to a legal state, consult with, like Michigan has a great bud tender education put on by nurses. So they actually know
more than doctors.
More than doctors do, which is great because they have to take a test and have to get certified on what they give. And the dispensaries are expensive, but you have a lot of Michigan has a lot of cannabis caregivers, and they're allowed
Right.
5 patients. So that, I believe, is Shelly's goal. It's a lot of work with just our medicine.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure out a better system than what we have right now. But we're learning how to grow. We're learning how to plant. We're learning how to when to put the plants under the high pressure sodium lights. We're learning. We're trying to make sure all the light leaks are out, because you get seeds. Our first batch, we had a whole bunch of seeds, but the paper came off of the window because it got so hot.
We were at the lakes.
The tape, yeah, we were at the lakes. And it separated, and it's just like everything happens when you go to have fun. It's like, oh, everything's going great for a week or two.
Back and like,
Well, and then our timer burned out, so it just left the lights on for like 36 hours. So
now we don't go to the lakes very much, but we've learned that it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of little things you don't think of. We have fried stuff,
and they came back.
Implants. Yeah, they're really hard. People just tell you that.
Yeah, you really have to work at killing them.
You do.
Exactly.
Grow, right?
Say that again.
You're ready to learn to grow, aren't you?
I can't have plants because I'm in an apartment, but I've babysat plants. I did have them outside. So in the summertime last year, I was foster mom to 12 plants. And at the end, I was supposed to get 6 of the harvest. But what ended up happening is someone stole them.
Oh, no.
Came in and chopped them all down right before harvest. But anyways, no. So I've been doing some grow shows with other growers because it's very interesting to me. Cultivation is very interesting to me. Gardening is very interesting to me. And the plant's very interesting to me. So, working with the plant and having the plant, it just you get to know it. It's like there's nothing. You guys must just love it. Being in your grow space, just being there with music on and just being with the plants and touching them and talking to them and smelling them. I mean, that itself is healing.
Oh, we have strawberry bubbles right now when you walk downstairs. You smell it throughout the whole. As soon as you hit the basement, you smell the strawberry bubbles in there.
The driveway.
Oh, well, yeah, that too, because our main vent is out by the
driveway.
Our front door.
You're blowing cannabis aroma down.
We don't have to have a buffer. It's okay in Michigan that you can let the smell out, and so we think it smells beautiful.
And when we open the windows up to exhaust the house, it just gets pulled right in. The whole house smells like
the whole house smells delicious. Right? I look at it as aromatherapy. That's exactly what it is. I mean, seriously, you stick your face in some cannabis, and all of a sudden, it's like you can feel it, you can smell it, you can taste it. It's so powerful and so beautiful.
He laughed because he'll say, if we have an argument, he'll say she gets high and forgets about what we're arguing about anyway. So it works.
It works. So what are your plans for the future, you two? What's going on with Shelly and Jason for Healing Green and your hemp community? What are your plans for the future? What are we looking forward to?
Well, next week we're going to talk with the Indiana Attorney General because he wanted to learn about cannabis.
Yes.
Because he said that it looks like in the next year or two, the federal government's going to legalize one way or another, and we're just going to have to know. And he wanted information. So we work with a drug recognition officer, retired, and he still has buddies who do the work, and it's the highest training that a officer can receive in the United States is this drug recognition course out in California. So, but they're taught to identify what you're high on, and they know how to do the test so they can identify it. The problem that Rokita is interested in is how do we keep people safe on the road? How do we keep the public safe? Well, there's already technology that's been out for 20, 30 years. It's on the phone. It's an app, and it measures if you're impaired or not. It doesn't matter if you're tired and impaired. Doesn't matter if you're on oxycodone or a benzo. So these are things that we're looking at, trying to work with politicians to develop good policy. And
right.
So if you can't develop good policy, you're stuck with like Alabama, which has to wait 2 years before they can get their medical, even though they legalized it.
Or states that can't grow their own, which here in Michigan, we each get to grow 12 of our own. And what he was talking about, the patient care system, in 1 year, I will be able to grow for 5 patients also. So I'll be able to have 72 plants.
So listen, as nurses, this is another thing we got to push for: institutional caregiver program. So having a nursing organization.
Well, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Limited,
It's
right.
not, but the citizens who grow their own medical cannabis, they have a system where they can meet and share and trade plants and do things and help each other out. So that's and learn from each other.
Well,
they have to learn to grow on their own. They all came here and they didn't know how to grow. Everybody came here as like the green rush, and then a lot of people aren't here because they failed, or it was a lot harder than what they thought when they grew the cannabis. Because we had no idea. Your rooms have to be climate controlled, and the humidity levels and a lot of things. There's a lot to it.
Well, and the reason that this group formed together as a coalition was because the big business came into Michigan and tried to take it over and get the legislation changed so you couldn't have cannabis patient caregivers. They tried to eliminate, big business did, and which I think is horrific. If you want somebody to grow your products, how it's grown, where it's coming from. And if you have a problem with it, you can go directly to the grower and say, hey, look, this is the problem I have, or this is what I need. Can you work with me? Yep. A big business, they just do whatever they want, how they're going to make money.
Plus, you can't afford, unless you're growing or perhaps somebody's growing for you, be able to afford a daily cannabis user could not afford to medicate.
Yeah, with the dispensary prices.
It's just,
oh
my gosh. I think a quarter ounce up here, a veteran told us he went and got a quarter ounce. It was $130. With the
a quarter of an ounce?
A quarter ounce. What's the taxes and everything were on it. Now, he may have bought a big fancy grade, but still, I was like, oh.
Still, for a fancy grade, that's robbery.
It's just ripping people off.
It is. I mean, honestly, I can't wait. This is what I imagine. I imagine a day where we can go into Kroger's or Stop and Shop or Shaw's, and we can go into the flower section and we can see beautiful cannabis plants. Oh, I'm just going to add this to my cart. Or if we have the farmers markets where everyone's going to have their plants and their different products. I imagine side of the road stands. Seriously. Why not? Like, literally, there's something for everyone in this space, whether it be, traditional,
the cooking, the processing, the growing.
There's something for everyone, and it needs to be affordable. It's life changing. It's life altering. It's a miracle. There is no reason for it to be that expensive. It's really
to be like what you said, where everyone grew it. Actually, the federal government used to mandate that cannabis and turn it into the government as part of paying your taxes.
That was back in what, the 1800s, 1700s?
Well, the founding fathers.
If you had a farm, you had to grow. And if you didn't grow, you get taxed. You either paid in hemp or paid money.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the growing part, we know a lot of hemp growers. And Indiana destroyed 20% of their crops last year because they said they were too hot. Which Kentucky used to do that. But the growers were saying, your policy is wrong. They said, you take a sample and then you make me wait too long to harvest it. So the sample's hot. And they were only taking it from the flower, not the average through the plant, like the federal government recommends. So Indiana has a lot of catching up to do. And the hemp farmers are trying to educate the politicians on how do you grow a plant. And they don't know because they're not the hemp farmers. And there's nobody in politics that knows how to do this that I'm aware of. If there is, they're not being listened to. So I've worked with a lot of hemp farmers. Shelly is in the hemp industry. That was her niche until we moved to Michigan. So but cannabis to me is cannabis. Yeah. The scientists say all cannabis is the same, whether it's hemp or marijuana, depending on how long you grow it, and because it crosses over, you can interbreed it. So a lot of countries are going back.
I mean, the difference between cannabis and hemp is what? A lab test.
That's right, the THC level. Yeah. So you can have a hemp plant genetically, but all of a sudden it becomes marijuana, or you can have a marijuana plant and it could have too low of THC. Just because that's how the genetics are, or the soil's bad, or your sun wasn't hot enough, and you now have hemp instead of marijuana. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So where can people find you and your wife? We've got a lot of viewers out there. Where can they find you guys? There we go.
So we have a Facebook page, Healing Green with Jason and Shelly.
Nope, I'm part of the group.
Shelly has
Sorry,
the hemp and nurse.
The service dog's been playing me this whole time for treats. And you hear her, like, I'm out of treats again. So I had to sneak off twice because she knows I can't get away. She's like a kid. She's at her barking.
Oh, I know.
And you can find me on Indiana Normal too. We have one of the board members who monitors the Facebook page, but there's also, we're on Indiana Normal's on on Twitter and I think TikTok and Instagram. And then the web page, we're fighting to get our original web page 20 years back. Somebody hijacked it.
Ooh.
Yeah, and there's illegal companies selling stuff on there pretending to be us.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
And one of our members, their bank account got hacked from that site. So Indiana.org is temporarily, we've told people that follow us on Indiana Normal, go to the .net, because we own, I think, 3 different websites, but we were only using the .org. And our tech guy has been trying to get the site back. So if you go to Indiana.org, you might be in for a surprise because they might hack your bank account.
Don't go there. Okay, so we're gonna put the correct links in.
Yeah, go to the .net instead of the .org, and you can find all our information there. So there,
and then we'll make sure we have a link to your page too, to your group and your page. I think I may have put it down below in the comments there. A link to all of your social media accounts. So hopefully that will be there. So you guys are awesome. You're a power couple in the industry. You're both cannabis nurses. You're both doing amazing things. You're spreading the message of cannabinoid therapeutics, the miracle of the plant. You're decreasing stigma. You're changing lives. You're saving lives. And it was an honor to have you both on the show. Seriously. You guys are doing great work. And it's an honor. What was that?
Your show is a blessing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This is, I mean, I'll just going to kind of backtrack a little bit. So I was so plagued with stigma. And I remember being plagued with the stigma, my mom writing me out of her will and blocking me on Facebook. And in 2018, when the National Council State Boards of Nursing came up with a call to action that all nurses, advanced practice nurses, and nursing students must have 6 essential areas of clinical knowledge when it comes to cannabis as medicine, that kind of lit a fire under my butt. And I sat there in meditation one day, and I swear I heard the plant say to me, Sherri, you're either in or you're not in. You're either all in or you're not in. And being all in means this: you need to get real, you need to be authentic, you need to be transparent, and you need to share your story. So I got really, really lucky. I met someone back in 2018 that helped me to start podcasting. And the whole reason for me starting the podcast was to come out of the cannabis closet, to work through my own stigma, and to share compelling stories of healing. Because it's those stories that are giving people, I call it the little hug and the nug of information to make them stop. Really, what is a true miracle? A miracle is a change of perception. To change someone's perception around something, to work through the stigma, the reefer madness, the cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance says this: you have the research that's out there that's showing and proving, and then you have people that feel that's not real. Oh, I don't know. That's the cognitive dissonance. And so with the miracle around this is decreasing that dissonance of knowledge versus feeling. So once you feel it and you go down that rabbit hole, you can't go back. You just can't. The knowledge is there. The science is there. The stories are real. The stories are compelling. The future research will be done on these anecdotal stories. It's just that they're focusing on what the most important thing is right now. But it will happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so I'm just really, really excited that I answered the phone to Cannabis. Cannabis called and I picked it up. Whoop! So here we are years later. I started in 2018. So yeah, 18, 19, 20, here we are, a few years in podcasting. And it has changed my life. It's humbled me. I've got to meet some great, great people. Really, really honored and grateful that our podcast was recognized a couple of times in New England. We won Best Podcast for 2020 for the New England Cannabis Awards. The New England NECAN, New England Cannabis Convention. And then Mike Wise show, I have a medal over there. We won for 2021 best podcast.
Oh,
You know, there was 3 other podcasts that won. We were one of them, and just really, really honored. And we do this because we love it. We love the plant. We love how it's changed our lives, and we want other people to have that new level of wellness and the education around it to make choices. No one needs to suffer. No one needs to suffer. And this plant is an amazing adaptogen. It helps us, our bodies, to adapt to stress. You know, you hear me educate on my little friggin' umbrella, because I needed to understand, I needed to create an image for people to get. You know, we are that umbrella. And as long as we're nourishing our umbrella, our bodies, our umbrella is going to go up and down nicely, and it's going to do what it needs to do. And so that's why I started podcasting. Thank you for acknowledging it. You know, I forget, like, this is just something that's become a part of my life. It's, you know, we don't get paid for it. We're not making any money on our podcast. We're doing it because we love it. We love the plant. We love people, and we love the planet. And we know, we know this can change lives. And so that's why we show up. So thank you for acknowledging that. You know, I'm really humbled and really grateful that I have this opportunity, because literally in 2012, I thought I was going to die. And at the end of 2014, I wanted to die. So there it is.
That feeling. We've been there.
Yeah.
But life is better.
Yep.
Life keeps calling, right? Life keeps calling, and cannabis plant keeps whispering in my ears, and the creativity and what I've been able to do with my life. I literally have done more as a nurse, as a disabled nurse, not working, you know, in the traditional system. I've done more to help people with cannabis than I have in my entire career doing anything else. So I look at it. Whoa, anything else that I can do is just sprinkles on that unicorn cupcake.
Yeah, I agree.
I truly believe if our wounded came back and we had a military cannabis program to heal them, it would be phenomenal. But the problem is, I have a lot of friends who are higher up. Some of them are commanders, some of them are generals or retired colonels that support cannabis, but they're not allowed to say anything because they're active for the government, and the federal government says you cannot talk about this. And I've run across that with doctors at IU Health, biggest system in Indiana. They've been told they cannot speak out about what they know on cannabis unless it's first approved by the administration. We had a pharmacist who was going to speak, and they ended up backtracking for the child, and they were scripted. And we were like, what the hell just happened? But so these shows help to educate everybody, healthcare professionals, politicians, the public. And hopefully, like you said, we can break the stigma down enough that our healthcare professionals and our government experts can start sharing what they know instead of being muzzled. Exactly.
Take the muzzle off. Certainly mine's off. A lot of people want to muzzle me, I tell you right now. Censorship is incredible.
We just hit them with education. And, you know, most people, as soon as they learn that they have a system in the human body, a lot of times they're just like, what? And I'll say, get your phone out, okay? Like, you know, Google it, look, learn. And
look and learn.
People learn that there's a whole system in the human body. I mean, I think that's life-changing.
It is life-changing. It is. So anyways, we're going to wrap it up. You and I will talk a little bit more, but let's say goodnight to our viewers. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's really been an honor to have both Jason and Shelly on. Shelly is a surprise guest. Oh, let's see the shirt. Stand up so everyone can see it. There we go. Indiana Normal.
So change that to .net and you're good. There you go. This is an old shirt.
All right, wait. Let's get a picture, a family photo. 1, 2, 3, cheese. All right, everyone. Remember what it's all about. It's about living your best life and helping others do the same. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. bright and early for Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. Nurse Mark, I want to give a big plug to him, was out tonight networking. He was at an event. So really grateful for that he was able to do that. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Live your best life, help others do the same, and decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. All right, see you all later.